Ukrainian weapons have struck deep inside Russian territory, hitting air bases previously thought untouchable. We are going to be breaking down whether this is a dangerous escalation or a sign of Ukrainians never letting the Russians rest anywhere. I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. It is December 6th, 2022. This is your daily Ukraine update. Okay, first off, as always, checking out Ground News. Link to them is in the description. Great source of news, filtering, really summarizing dozens of news sources across the political spectrum. And that's important in this conflict. Here, Ukrainian long-range drone attacks expose Russian air defenses. It says a third Russian airbase has been set ablaze on Tuesday from a drone strike. They say a day after Ukraine demonstrated an apparent new ability to penetrate hundreds of kilometers deep into Russian airspace. Now, this is really interesting because let's take a look at the map and get a sense of just how deep this weapon system goes. So as you guys can see here is some of the more recent fighting, and it looks very typical. You can see shelling has resumed across the front lines. You also have a series of attacks near Bakhmut. Looks like the Wagner group themselves has chosen to go back on the offensive, even as largely the forces around Donetsk city do not. But that's not what's interesting. What's interesting is when we zoom out, right? And you can see that we have to zoom out a lot to detect some of these attacks. Here is the deepest attack, deep inside Russian territory, not even remotely close to anything that could be considered the front lines. And yet here we have satellite image of this Engels Air Base taken this morning. You can see a Tu-95, Russia's longest range bomber. Looks like there was some firefighting foam deployed at the airbase. So probably seems like this may have been more of a message sending strike than a true military incapacitation. That said, these Tu bombers are expensive, and Russia has a hard time repairing even one of them. So any damage is good damage. But you know, I think with drones, just like any other aircraft, you trade weight for distance. And it looks like this particular instance is just about sending a message, would be my guess. But there's more, right? They didn't just stop here. Here in Kursk Oblast, there is a fuel reservoir that caught fire after a suspected drone attack on the airfield. We can actually see footage of it here. Hopefully. Nope. Guess they don't want us to see the truth. Good? No, nothing. Okay, but that's okay. You guys can see again. This is hundreds of miles. Let's see, 10 miles. Here's the nearest border. So we're talking about probably around 100 miles or so. It would be my estimate. This is way deep in Russian territory, and that's not even. We're still not done. You can see here, again, looks like about 50 to 70 miles in. There's even more two more drones exploded at a factory in Bryansk. I assume a military target, right? Generally, Ukraine seems to have been respecting targeting military sites. Now, let's talk about what this means for the war effort at large. Now, we have to place these strikes in context. And an important piece of context is that Russia itself, right, has been systematically targeting Ukrainian civilian infrastructure, power stations, water plants, using missile strikes all across the country, right? From, Kiev to Lviv. We've seen significant missile strikes hitting major urban areas and targeting the civilian population, right? The power plant in Kiev is not fueling the war effort over here, right? A water treatment plant in Lviv is not what the soldiers on the front lines are drinking. They have no military value. And Russia has shown an absolute willingness to not just ignore civilians on the battlefield, not just fail to protect them, but they've actually targeted them deliberately. And the I don't believe this is an escalation, despite what Russia will almost certainly claim this is some unprecedented escalation bullshit thing. Targeting military targets inside Russian territory is a logical, is meeting, it's not even meeting Russian aggression. Because if they were meeting Russian aggression, that would involve targeting infrastructure and residential, services with Ukrainian strikes. They're not. They're targeting, as far as I can tell, military facilities or facilities with an immediate military application, like an arms factory. So I would not characterize this as a dangerous escalation. Obviously, the U.S. and NATO partners have said you will not deploy our weapons on Russian soil. The optics of a NATO-stamped missile landing in, Kursk is simply too bad, and Ukrainians have been very disciplined about respecting that. And so some of the reports, the Russians claim, so take this with a massive grain of salt, that these drones are long-range drones that are actually modified Soviet-era jets, which is sort of fascinating, that you could create actually a drone that flies a jet. Though we've seen that would not be a new tactic for Ukraine. The reason, as we've seen in previous footage, where they modified small boats to also be pilotable remotely, to turn small boats into drones. So it's a logical next step that they would be able to take, especially a simple Soviet-era jet with maybe not super complicated controls, and install a remote system to let those be piloted remotely, or even get turned into basically just guided missiles. Again, how much is this going to really impact Russia's ability to wage war? Damaging air bases can be very impactful, especially on a resource-constrained force like Russia. I think the most successful attack was probably this aviation fuel depot. We know that Russia makes a lot of oil and natural gas, but aviation fuel is not just pumped out of the ground. It's refined, and it's several times more expensive to refine even than the gasoline that powers your car. And so this is very valuable fuel if they indeed were able to destroy an aviation fuel dump. The attack out here, obviously crippling a long-range bomber, but Russia generally hasn't used long-range bombers in Ukraine. It's too dangerous. Their air defenses are too robust to allow their long-range bombers to fly over Ukrainian airspace. So this is more of a symbol of just you're safe nowhere. And this factory, I think more information needs to emerge. Anyway, guys, that is all I had for you for today. Certainly big news. As always, if you want the combat videos that YouTube won't let me show you, they've been cracking down on monetization, and there's been a lot of wild combat videos. Become a member of the Patreon. Thanks so much to my Lieutenant tier patrons. You guys are the ones who really make this channel possible, and I'll see you guys in the next one.